When I lived in Washington, D.C., I went over to the museum and I had a chance to look at all the different arts in Capitol Hill where I lived. And I remember walking into the art museum and seeing like Da Vinci. I began to see, Rembrandt, Monet, Van Gogh. I saw these originals on the wall, these original pieces of art that are worth, obviously, untold amounts of cash. I'm looking at these going, wow, like I've never seen an original artwork before. So I went up there, took it all in. I walked through all these rooms and enjoyed it. Well, then I went into another room that was lit up and it was filled with these different works of art. And in that room were Monets and Van Goghs and Picassos and all the same kind of artists, but these were replicas. These were pieces of art that they took from the original and made replicas. They could go up in dorm rooms, they can go hang above your couch, they can go get framed and put up, in your living room, whatever it was. Those were all replicas. And when you look at that, I began to think about that and think, and the original was worth millions. Those replicas I bought for $30. You could buy a replica for cheap, because when you make copies, when you choose to make imitations, they lose their value. That's the beauty of an original. It's unique to itself. It has a value. It has a uniqueness to it and a value to it that the world needs, that your community needs, that your relationships needs. You can be a masterpiece or you can be mass produced. There's a difference in that. You can be mass produced from the point of thinking through like an assembly line. I'm walking into a Target and seeing, a whole bunch of the same things produced, put on the shelf of pieces of art or posters or whatever we're talking about that you can see that are lined on the walls of Target, that every Target has, or you can create your own masterpiece. There's so much value to it, which is amazing. So when you look at that, I want you to know that an original is what God's called you to be, and the original comes from the Latin word meaning the first in time, or in other words, it means one of a kind. There's nothing like that. I could go buy a produced greeting card in Hallmark greeting card and get one of those and have my son just write his name in it. But there's something totally different when my boy Magnus gets out and scribbles and draws a stick figure of him and I playing soccer with a stick figure where I look like I'm like just a stick. My son is there kicking a ball in some grass that he drew. That is way more valuable than a mass-produced card that's sitting in a Hallmark store. Just trying to show you that he drew it. He made that. That given to me, that has value to me more than any other card ever would. And so when you think about that, there's something to that whole idea of being a person of how to develop your originality. And the key to that is going to be your authenticity. The key to developing your own originality will be your authenticity. Because when you embrace your originality, that unearths and releases the authenticity of who you're supposed to be. I put a quote down, I put this down that I kind of crafted. It says, authenticity dismantles who others want you to be and enhances who you're supposed to be. So be vulnerable. Authenticity says, and vulnerability says, I accept you before you accept me. Authenticity starts when you become vulnerable in your relationships. When you choose vulnerability, you choose community. It's a big quote, but it's this idea of as you're authentic, and as you begin to not only be authentic, but begin to be vulnerable with people, it allows your community to see the real you, and it develops that originality that you have. Because people are gonna see who you are. They're gonna get a look inside you. They're gonna see the rough patches and the smooth patches. They're gonna see all that you are. And as you begin to do that, it's gonna allow yourself for you to be you. When you embrace the originality, you cease being what others want you to be. You cease being what you think you're supposed to be, and you be who God wants you to be. There's nothing more freeing of that for you as a leader. There's nothing more freeing than for you to be who God has called you to be when you embrace your originality. The third part about this is I want to talk about defending your originality. We talked a little bit about authenticity, and authenticity is really one of the greatest gifts you can give someone. When you become authentic, there's something in that authenticity in a world that wants you to be, let's say fake, or let's just say trying to just show the best parts of you, the highlight reel into your Instagram and all these other things. There's something when you pull that away and you really show your true self and your authenticity, that just is freeing, and it sets up your originality and celebrates your originality. And that's why I think one of the biggest, when it comes to defending your originality, the biggest enemy to your originality is going to be self-protection. When you want to protect yourself from what others want to see. You want to protect yourself from letting people in. You want to protect yourself so that no one can really see the real you, so you just give them a glimpse, or you put on a veneer or facade. And the result of that is you just continue to adjust yourself to who people want you to be. You only show them the glimpse, and that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of sideways energy. That's a lot of energy that you're putting in trying to protect yourself, when God is wanting to reveal yourself and show off that originality on display, like the Van Goghs in the art gallery, you know? So in regards to self-protection and identifying these battles, I have a quick few of them here. Self-protection, if you're talking about originality and self-preservation kind of hitting each other, self-protection is rooted in fear, and originality is rooted in vulnerability. I keep hitting that word. I keep bringing up this word vulnerability, because not everyone's going to like you. It's just the way it's going to go. It's hard for me to realize this, but not everyone's going to like me. Not everyone's going to celebrate the originality that should be celebrated. So the result of that is going to be, I'm going to want to hide myself and keep myself hidden. But when we say no, even though they may not like what they see, or I'm afraid of what others are going to think, if I choose to look at that and go and say, I'm not going to be afraid of what others think of me. I'm not going to be afraid of what they see when I'm authentic or I'm vulnerable. Then when I choose to overcome that fear, that's when my originality begins to flourish. It comes out, it gets to be seen. Because some of us will look at it and say, well, vulnerability maybe that's just a weakness. Like, nobody wants me to sit at a table and share my vulnerabilities. Is that weak, Alan? Is that what you're saying? I put this down. I said, vulnerability doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you're brave enough to embrace that you don't have it all together, but you lean in and trust a God who holds it all together. And that's what God does. So be authentic in your leadership. Don't just share the easy stuff, share the hard stuff. Share the dirt with people. Authenticity says, this is who I am. Vulnerability says, and this is what I've done. So share both. Be authentic. Be vulnerable in those moments, so that you can show people. Originality is not an option. Originality is not an option. It's an obligation. They want to see you. People need to see you and know you and embrace you and understand you. I also put this down before, a couple more points on self-protection before I do. The authenticity that's rooted in your originality gives you an authority. It dismantles who others want you to be, and it enhances who you're supposed to be, and inspires who you could be to others. That's the beauty about authenticity. That's the beauty about choosing to be able to be someone who says, you know what, when I'm original, it gives me a permission to be myself, and not just a permission, but it gives me a strength and authority. Another battle, when talking about the self-protection versus originality, we're defending our originality. Self-protection controls situations, but originality celebrates people. So when you are authentic, you are showing others who you are. And when people see that, that gives an opportunity to say, wow, I love what I see. That's a good thing. When you see other people being themselves, don't wish you were them. Don't long to be them, but look at them and say, man, I celebrate who you are. I celebrate that originality. When you're looking at people on your leadership team, or in the areas where you're leading, or in your community group, or on your staff or whatever, and you see people and their gifts rise to the surface, don't be jealous of that, or don't be prideful in some way to that, but celebrate that. Because when you celebrate that, it allows pride not to even enter the picture. It allows you to recognize who they are and their gifts, and that affirms their own originality so that you can be your own person, have your own originality as well. And that does take courage. It does take courage to do that when you're authentic. Courage comes from the Latin word cur, which is where we get the word heart. And I think fear is overcome when the heart of the person is revealed in others. When you have courage and you lean into courage, that Latin word heart begins to be revealed. And when that heart that's in you is revealed to others, fear can't stand that. Fear can't overcome that because of who God made you to be. When your heart is revealed, there's just no way it can stand. Lastly, I put self-protection wastes relational energy, and originality creates relational connectivity. Say it one more time. Self-protection wastes relational energy versus originality, which creates relational connectivity. The enemy of your originality, one of the biggest ones, is going to be shame. Shame is one of the greatest things that will get in the way of you wanting to connect with others. If the greatest human desire is to be connected, then the greatest enemy to that connection will be shame. And it will try to sabotage you and will try to stop you. I mean, you go back even, shame will always give you the greatest pushback, and it will always get in the way, and it will constantly resist you from being who God's called you to be. And when you go back to the beginning with Adam and Eve, and you see what Adam and Eve walked through when they sinned and they found their first moment when they were sinning in the garden, God's response is, where are you? And this isn't because God didn't know where they were, but it's because God wanted to know how they were. That's when God says that question. It's like, how are you? What is going? Shame puts you in a place of isolation and removes you. And that's one of the biggest things. It's one of the biggest battles of originality, is to be able to hide that originality or isolate that originality or put you in a place of isolation, solitary confinement. Because when shame tries to come in and you try to connect in your community and show others who you are in the midst of being vulnerable and all this other stuff, it puts you in a position where you go into isolation, and shame can do that. It can hide you, it can isolate you. And shame, in essence, makes you unoriginal. Why? Because shame labels you. Shame tries to put this on you. Shame says you are, if you're caught in a lie or something, shame says you are a liar. If you are trying to deal with, shame says you are a liar, or you are lustful, or you are perverted, or you are unwanted, or you are a loser. Shame tries to label you rather than you being you. Shame tries to cover that with just another label or another label that's like, you're just a liar like everybody else. You're just a loser like everybody else. And it tries to, fill in the blank like everybody else that you've seen. But what originality does and what God does is it rips that label off. It rips off that label that says you're just like everybody else and puts you back to saying, no, you are you. You are, say your name, you. I have made you. You are my creation. You are my son. You are my daughter. You are my child, and I love you like no one else can love you. That's what originality does when you really fully embrace that. It puts shame, and it takes, when shame tries to make you average and reduce you to being an average person, like everybody else or every other sinner, every other person. Originality rips off that label and says, you are unique, and I've made you who you're supposed to be. And it's a good thing. Originality comes in and celebrates you, and celebrates where you've been, and celebrates where you are now, and confirms where you're going. You can recognize the voice of shame because shame says you are the wrong person, you don't belong, you are not original, you are this, you are that. We talked about that. But one of the biggest ways to destroy shame and get to that place of originality is through forgiveness. Forgiveness says, even though you made the wrong choice, you still belong. Forgiveness says, repentance says that it removes the shame from you and allows you to say, I'm sorry I did that. I want to be restored back to who I originally was before that label came on me, before shame tried to reduce me to average or reduce me to who I'm not. Repentance and forgiveness reminds you of who God says you are. Lastly, devoting yourself to originality. That's really important, that as you're discovering and realizing and doing all these things of your originality, devoting yourself to originality has got to be a conviction you have to have. And I think one of the ways you do that is being creative. You reclaim, when you be creative, you are claiming your creativity by resisting the status quo. And that's good. That when you're creative, when you continue to be creative in environments, when you continue to step out and try things, when you continue to put yourself in a leadership situation and say, I'm just going to experiment with this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this and make this choice and hope it works, and trust that God's going to show up, and believe that God's going to step in, and trust that God's going to meet me here. I'm going to try this creative idea at my church, or try this creative leadership idea with my staff. When you do those kind of things, it allows you to resist the status quo that wants to push you down and make you average again. It puts you as a stepping out amongst the crowd saying, I'm going to try this. There's a book called Originals, How the Nonconformists Changed the World. And Adam Grant, the author, writes this: creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. I love that. Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes, but art's knowing which ones to keep. So guess what? You're gonna try creative things. You're gonna take steps out there, but you're worth keeping. You are worth keeping. That's why you're here. That's why God has made you. You're worth keeping. Your creativity is worth sharing. Your creativity isn't perfection, but it's inspiration. You are inspiring people when you are original. Inspiration comes from the Latin word, which means to breathe. I think that's so interesting that as you're being creative and leaning into your own inspiration, it's like God is breathing into you. God is allowing His breath to come into your situation and breathe into you. So when you are being creative and you are putting yourself in that place of devoting yourself to your originality, God's breathing into those moments, and He's not going to allow you to suffocate under all of the pressure. He will keep His breath in you. Another thing is to be open as you're in this place of devoting yourself. Be creative, but also be open. Don't try to be someone else, because when you try to keep yourself closed off and allow yourself to try to just not be open to everyone else and in the community, but you choose to close yourself off, that's when you miss out. There's something about being open. When we try to be someone else to everyone else, it's wrong. Because when we hide the undesirable parts of our lives, we're building our lives on a facade rather than a foundation. And that's one of the key things. It's like a movie set. When you go into a place and when you hide those parts of your lives and you choose to build yourself on the hidden parts, they're not sturdy. It's like a movie facade. It's like, it looks strong from the exterior. It looks like it's sturdy, but it's nothing more than a flat two-dimensional structure. There's no strength to it. It's not able to withstand anything. So when you come into that place though, and you say, no, I'm gonna be open, I'm gonna be who God's called me to be, that's when strength, it makes you stronger. It becomes the foundation. In Romans 8:38-39, it says that God accepts us and He loves us no matter what, and nothing can ever separate us from who He's called us to be and what He's linked us to, who He is. When He's wrapped Himself around us and put us with Him, it keeps us and it strengthens us. Last thing I'll say as we're looking at this final thought on devoting to your originality, is to be risky. That sometimes it takes more than one time I'm trying to be myself and it was hard, and You know what I mean? It was difficult and no one accepted me, and so I'm just gonna go back into my shell. Being yourself is a risk. Being yourself means you're gonna put yourself out there, and sometimes you're gonna fall down, and sometimes it's gonna be hard. But originality says it's worth the risk. All these artists and these painters, and they put themselves out there, and they put their art out for the world to see and to love to appreciate what they've done. They took a risk to put it out. They just didn't leave it in their attic or their basement. They went and put those originals out there, and they were celebrated. So have a commitment, no matter what, to try and try and try, to keep going, to keep being yourself, to put yourself out there and keep stepping into your gifts, stepping into your talent, stepping into your personality, stepping into your leadership, stepping into those things. Keep stepping out. I was looking at some famous artists that even though you still keep trying, even though it feels like you're failing and all this, I found a quote as I close it. It's talking about, I'm going to just read it. I think it's the best way to do it. It says, consider Shakespeare. We are the most familiar with a small number of his classics, forgetting that in the span of 2 decades, he produced 37 creative written works. Mozart composed over 600 pieces before his death at 35, and Bach over 1,000 in his lifetime. Picasso's creative legacy is composed of over 17,800 paintings, sculptures, ceramics, and drawings, not to mention prints, rugs, and tapestries. So it's less about perfection, and it's more about you being willing to fail, and it's okay to fail. Don't worry about perfect. You think that Shakespeare and the rest of these artists just created one perfect piece in one shot? It took them time after time after time after time after time again to discover their originality. It took them shot after shot after shot after shot, attempt after attempt after attempt after attempt, before they discovered some of the greatest original works. So step out, take the risk. There is originality in you that's priceless, and it will require you to step out. It's going to require you to take a risk and see what happens, what sticks, what God does with it. But when you do take the risk, you can trust and know that God is with you every step of the way. Thanks a lot, Acts Academy. Keep swinging away, and we'll see you again soon.